Ever wondered what happens if you break down in the Australian outback?
This is the 4x4 we hired to travel the East Coast. This is also the 4x4 that broke down and left us stranded in the middle of nowhere.
Here's a summary of the past week. Enjoy! Our East Coast plan is to start. We started in Melbourne. We picked up a rental relocation vehicle. We drove that vehicle to Sydney because in Sydney is where we were picking up our next vehicle, this vehicle. Rental relocation from Melbourne to Sydney. And then from Sydney, get the 4x4 that we're going to be in for the next month and a bit. Take that straight up to Cairns. That is 27 solid hours of driving non-stop. Obviously we're not doing it non-stop because we're not crazy, although some people might think you are crazy for doing that anyway, because as we are experiencing, it is very tough. Day one of our Australian road trip.
Today we drove from Melbourne to Holbrook, which is 380 kilometres and took us just over 4 hours.
We did our quick food shop at Aldi. We arrived at our campsite and checked in. It cost $38 for one night powered site.
Once we were all set up, we took a walk into town for a quick beer and stumbled upon a Christmas festival.
And then for dinner, I cooked us some delicious steaks.
Day 2 of our Australian road trip.
We woke up in the rain and then we had to drive 407 kilometres all the way from Holbrook up to Bendila.
Thankfully, we're doing a camper van relocation, so the rain didn't stop us enjoying lunch.
We arrived at our campsite in Bendila and had tacos for dinner.
Then, just as the sun started setting, the wombats came out.
Funny little creatures. First time me and Katie had ever seen them in the wild. They were kind of cute, kind of inquisitive, but a right pain when you're trying to sleep. They like to scratch their back on the bottom of your vehicle, causing the whole vehicle to rock throughout the night. Day 3 of our Australian road trip.
We're on our way to Sydney. Woo! Woohoo! This morning we drove from Bendila to Sydney, gave the camper van relocation a quick clean, and then picked up our 4x4 rental and dropped the relocation van off.
We then drove from Sydney to Murrurundi, making our daily distance 490 kilometres. Oh, tastes like ass.
We checked the Wiki Camps app and found another free campsite, this time at a pub.
We found the pub, had a quick beer, and then set up for camp for the first time in our roof tent. We had snags for dinner, sausages and bread, famously from Bunnings, the equivalent of B&Q back home.
Hello, motherfuckers! Day 2 in the Outback and we've gone insane. Ryan's lost his beard and I've lost my sanity.
We're both backpackers! Get us out of here!
Now, if you're currently thinking, doesn't look like a 4x4, you'd be correct. And here's why.
Day 4 of our Australian road trip.
We woke up in the pub car park and as we were packing away, one of the arms for the rooftop tent snapped. Luckily, it's still within warranty, which the rental company quickly provided us with, so we can get a replacement. Trouble is, we're nowhere near a city, 2 days away from the next one in fact.
So with this in mind, we found a cafe for breakfast and continued our drive north, deciding we'd just sleep in the back of the car for the next 2 nights. At lunchtime, our cooler decided to stop working, but we were determined not to be defeated. So we got a hamburger and a frozen Fanta from Macca's and continued on.
We arrived to a wet Queensland, met this very green frog whilst trying to use a servo, got so hungry we resorted to eating dry bread as there was no shops for miles, and then arrived in the dark to possibly the smallest town we've ever been to. This day only gets worse and won't fit into 1 minute, so subscribe to see part 2 of the disaster. Day 4 of our Australian road trip, part 2.
So if you saw part 1, you'll know that our tent broke. We drove from Murrurundi to Surat, a total of 662 kilometres, over 9 hours, and arrived in the dark to a campsite. Our cooler stopped working, so we couldn't eat any of the meat because it's probably gone warm, so we had to go to the pub for a very average dinner.
The main reason we chose a campsite as opposed to a free camping spot was because we desperately needed to do laundry, and the campsite had one we could use. The washing machine didn't work though, and left our clothes dirty and sopping wet. What's going on?
We're currently sleeping on an airbed in the back of the Prado.
This is how close we are to the roof.
I've got a big old battery next to me because it can't go out.
Why are we sleeping in the back?
Because the tent broke.
What else broke?
The fridge broke.
So we couldn't have dinner. We did laundry and the washing machine was broken.
It's all great.
Day 5 of our Australian road trip.
Last night we tried to sleep in the back of the car, but it was too hot, so slept in the broken tent instead, which wasn't much cooler.
We did some washing up and set off early with high spirits. Today was a lot of driving, but we were ready for it.
Stopped off in Roma to get some supplies in Kmart and Woolies, and nearly ran out of petrol. Filled up the car, washed off the dead bugs, and hit the road. And then we overheated.
Pulled over, popped the bonnet, and felt like we were on an episode of Stars in Your Eyes. Had a sandwich whilst we waited for the car to cool down.
After adding some more water to the car, it was still overheating, so we called for help, got towed back to Roma, and told mechanics we're fully booked until Christmas. Yay!
Managed to find a mechanic that could see us in 2 days' time, but all the accommodation was fully booked.
Thankfully found a caravan park with space for us, so we walked our bags there. It was all a bit much for me in my 3 hours sleep. Got the courtesy bus to a pub, had schnitzel for dinner, and somehow we're still smiling. Day 6 of our Australian road trip.
We're still stranded in the Outback with a broken down car, so we woke up in an air-conditioned cabin, not a broken tent today.
We went for a run around Roma, which was super hot, but flat at least.
When he says we, he means me.
Yeah, I said in the aircon.
We walked into town, had Macca's for lunch. If you haven't tried the frozen fancy yet, you need to.
Then we had lots of time to explore the town of Roma. We walked around the few shops they have, looking at camping stuff, but then remembered right now we have no tent or vehicle.
We got an ice cream sandwich, tried to go to the bank, but being in the country means it closed at 1. We asked ChatGPT to win Keno for us, an Australian lotto that's drawn every few minutes, but no such luck.
We then picked up a hire car for 24 hours because we were miserable walking around in the heat.
Ryan got so bored he shaved his beard off to go full Australian, and then we had a swim.
Hooray.
So we've heard back from the garage!
It's not good news! So the car is knackered. The exhaust gases are getting into the radiator, which they believe is either across the head gasket or it is through the cylinder block itself, which means the car has got to get sent away to a specialist to be further assessed, which is not going to happen until next year.
So that is the end of the car for us. We now have to wait to hear back from Camplify to see where they can send us.
So what it's looking like might happen is Orhan, who has been helpful as he can in this situation, he has offered us another vehicle back in Sydney. Unfortunately, that does mean we have to go back to Sydney and do all this travelling all over again. But we don't have many other options. It's either get a full refund and just scrap the trip, or we go back and get a vehicle. So we're not decided on that one yet. We're going to figure out what happens. Katie can't wait to do another 3 days of driving.
Through the bush. It's not even like nice coastal towns with cute little coffee shops, go for a little surf. No, it's nothing apart from green frogs and turd.
Oh, and lots of flies. So we will see what happens. Stay posted. Keep watching. Cause this shit you just can't make it up. And I got a mustache.
Bye, friends.
We'd love to stay.
Send us luck.
We'd love to stay. Probably a mustache.
Help. Oh yeah, the car's damaged. Can't be repaired. So we were like, oh no, okay, so we've got to get back to Sydney. But that's okay because Camplify told us on Tuesday when we broke down that you have 3 nights accommodation and 3 nights transport covered by them. Plus, if the car cannot be fixed, don't worry, we'll get you back to Sydney. So we thought, oh, obviously, like, it's shit because we don't want to have to go back to Sydney. This will now be like a week and a half of wasted time. But we were like, well, it's okay. So we got hold of Camplify, and they basically said, no, the 3 nights accommodation and 3 days transport includes you getting back to Sydney. Bear in mind, that's all capped as well, so they're saying we have 260, they've upped our limit, 260 bucks left on accommodation and 175 bucks left on transport. Now if you look at flights from Roma to Sydney, they don't exist. You go from Roma to Brisbane, Brisbane to Sydney flying, that's way above limit. If you go if we somehow manage to get ourselves 6 hours across the country to Brisbane and then fly from Brisbane to Sydney, that flight cost is something like 800 bucks, not including baggage. And obviously don't forget we were preparing for 5-6 weeks in a camper van, so we had a 4x4, so we have a lot of baggage, so that's kind of not an option. The Greyhound bus from Brisbane to Sydney was going to be over $500, and that doesn't even include us getting to Brisbane. So Camplify are shit. We're now somehow again Roma is fully booked on accommodation. I don't know who's staying here or why. We're now driving 40 kilometers away to the next available room.
It has been an ordeal. It has been stressful, it has been painful, and we might end up a few $100 out of pocket. If we weren't in such a remote place, it might not have been so bad, but it is what it is, unfortunately. Good morning. So we have got a plan now, no thanks to Camplify. So we've had to hire this car to get to Brisbane, which is going to cost us an additional $400. We then are staying a night in Brisbane, which the cheapest thing we could find where we could have parking and a room was $130. So then we're $30 over on the accommodation because we have a $100 allowance left. We then have to go drop this car off, go to pick up our iMover, which thankfully, iMover, you godsend, you have helped us out hugely. We have managed to secure a vehicle for 3 days with unlimited miles and unlimited fuel. No, unlimited miles and $100 fuel. So we're still probably gonna have to put another $100 in ourselves. But that will get us back to Sydney.
So total out of pocket is about $750 because Camplify are fucking useless. So Camplify have agreed to 3 nights accommodation and 3 days car hire, but they're all limited. So,
but we are gonna put in for this fucking car. So in the terms and conditions of Camplify, if it surely was taken before a court, it says that you are allowed a 3 days car hire, then in brackets, or $350 alternative transport. So that word or means one or the other. We have got 3 days car hire, and I will fight that. I will fight that.
So now we have a 6-hour drive to Brisbane, stay there for 1 night, and then 3 days to get back down from Brisbane to Sydney, pick up a new car,
and start again.
So we're about a week and a half behind, and about $750 out of pocket.
But we're still smiling, and shout out to Oz Travels for being super helpful.
So we'll probably update you in Brisbane unless anything else catastrophic happens. Bye.
Hooray!
Day 7 of our Australian road trip.
We're still stranded in the Outback with a broken down car, so we visited the largest bottle tree in Roma, got a Subway, and went to the Busch Gardens. We didn't stay long because we were scared of the snakes.
We had a beer and Ryan tried his luck on the dogs, and then we got the news that the car can't be fixed, so waited for ages on hold to Camplify. We now have to get back to where we started a week ago in Sydney. The car has been assessed and it's not being fixed. We need to now get back to Sydney to pick up another rental car, which Camplify basically not helping with, so we're stranded in the Outback.
He wants us to use our money we spent to travel on getting us back to where we started. So not only have we lost out on the trip, he's then going to make us use the money we would have used for the trip to get back to this fucking start. It's bullshit. Again, the town of course was fully booked, so we had to drive 40 kilometers out of the town to stay at the nearest pub, and then we had dinner. This is costing a fortune. Stay tuned to see if we actually make it back to Sydney. Day 8 of our Australian road trip.
We're finally back on the road, but this time in a hire car as we're leaving the 4x4 at the garage in Roma and going back to Sydney. Today's distance was 478 kilometres from Roma to Brisbane.
A quick refill, then came across this giant watermelon in Chinchilla. We found this free frisbee golf in Toowoomba, but unfortunately had no frisbees with us, so couldn't play.
We checked into the cheapest hotel we could find and enjoyed the free welcome drink. Here we met an Aussie and a Kiwi who we shared travel stories with.
We had a quick dinner, then the boys offered to show us the nightlife in Brisbane. So we got on a bus and headed for Felons, a massive bar with great views of Story Bridge.
This is Chester, the Kiwi, and Brandon, the Aussie. They're now loyal followers, so thank you for showing us Brisbane, boys.
We quickly realised though we were too old and too sober for Brisbane, so we hunted down some food and called an Uber.
Did anyone else not know that Lord of the Fries was vegan? Day 9 of our Australian road trip.
We checked out of our hotel, got some terrible sushi from Servo, picked up a cab of our relocation for $1 a day to get us back to Sydney, then dropped off the expensive hire car.
Back on the road, heading south to Sydney, but we have 3 days to do it so we can enjoy some of the coast. We stopped at the beach, tested the water temperature, freezing if you were wondering, and then spotted these massive spiders.
We found a campsite and walked to another beach to watch sunset, then had a steak for dinner. Delicious.
See you tomorrow!
So all in all, we've had a bit of a rough time. It's been very boring, very unfortunate. And there's not a lot. It's just one of those things that's just happened. Unfortunately, it's happened to us. We've had too much good luck for it to have run out now.
So we're now back in Sydney and hoping to pick up another 4x4 today and restart our East Coast trip, this time with no dramas. If you've made it this far in the video, well done to you.
Well done indeed.
What a boring video.
The videos will get better. Mood will get better. Like and subscribe.